not finished. Okay. If I can get everybody's attention, appreciate it. Today is Tuesday, August 5th. The time is 10:14 a.m. This hearing is now in session and is being recorded. My name is Joe Mall, and I'm the hearing officer. Again, I represent the Water Resources Commission from the West Central position in Eugene. Everything right? I thought you were on the screen. Okay. I did not receive any requests for accommodation to participate in this hearing by the August 3rd, 2025. The purpose of this hearing is to provide an opportunity for public comment on Oregon Water Resources Department proposed rule in OAR Chapter 690, Division 512, Harney Basin groundwater rules. In addition to presenting oral comments here at this hearing, anyone may submit written comments until 5 p.m. on August 13th, 2025, which is the close of the public comment period. You may send comments to Kelly Meinz, KELLYMEINZ, here next to me, at Oregon Water Resources Department, 725 Summer Street Northeast, Suite A, Salem, Oregon 97301, or email WRD_DL_rule RULE-COORDINATOR @water.oregon.gov. Comments received after 5 p.m. on August 13th, 2025 will not be reviewed or considered by the department unless the agency decides to extend the public comment period for everyone. The department will not respond to questions during this hearing. After the close of the comment period, department personnel will prepare a staff report for the Water Resources Commission, which will be publicly available. So we will again start. We don't have anybody on the phone wishing to comment, so we'll start. It looks like we have 2 commenters on Zoom, and we'll start with those 2, and then we'll go to commenters in the room. First up will be Patty Doro, who I understand is a county commissioner here, and they will be followed by Christopher Hall. So Patty, are you available and ready?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Patty Darrow, and I am from Harney County. I appreciate the opportunity to comment. I know the people and the economy of Harney County, and I have been part of and witness to the collaborative groundwater work for many years. I serve as Harney County Commissioner, but I am here as a member of the public, and these comments reflect my views. This is such important and new rulemaking work that will, in addition to curtailing the rate of groundwater level decline, affect an entire Oregon County. Appropriate groundwater curtailment is needed. Excessive groundwater curtailment, however, is not needed. It's not scientifically justified, and it poses a very real and unnecessary threat that will devastate the rural economy here. If my comments and many of the comments from other Harney County people have similar or even the same recommendations, it's because we have so many good, intelligent, well-informed, caring community members who have been involved in all the processes that the legislature and OWRD have established and facilitated for the past 10 years. It's because there is widespread local understanding and consensus on these issues and these recommendations. My comments are evidence-based, achieve the goal of successfully addressing long-term groundwater declines in the Harney Basin, yet abide by Oregon law. I urge you to hear and consider my comments and those of the residents of Harney County with extra attention. They are sound, fair-minded, success-oriented, and follow the law. My comments will cover 4 topics: mischaracterization of the Harney Basin, addressing areas of decline, fiscal and economic impacts of the rulemaking, and lack of collaboration and meaningful public engagement during the process. Here are my comments. Mischaracterization of the Harney Basin. The Harney Basin is not one groundwater reservoir. The proposed Division 512 rulemaking was built on the flawed and erroneous designation of the Harney Basin as one groundwater reservoir. That fundamental mischaracterization by OWRD was not supported by the most Harney County members of the Division 512 Rules Advisory Committee, or RAC, nor by science. OWRD claimed that the groundwater study called this all one groundwater reservoir. That statement was made in error. The term groundwater reservoir is a policy term, not a scientific one, and the delineation of a groundwater reservoir was at the discretion of OWRD. The definition in ORS 537.515 is as follows. Groundwater reservoir means a designated body of standing or moving groundwater having exterior boundaries which may be ascertained or reasonably inferred. There are many different ways for the department to ascertain or reasonably infer different boundaries. OWRD's decision to invoke a discretionary choice and designate the Harney Basin as one groundwater reservoir is fundamentally wrong, since it does not take into account much of the more site-specific information from the groundwater study, nor does it take into account local knowledge and expertise or management implications. This definition, which members of our community have objected to from the beginning, formed the technical basis for rulemaking that oversteps the state's legal obligations and roles. It unnecessarily harms the socioeconomic health of the county when there is no reason to do so. Once the flawed designation of the Harney Basin as one groundwater reservoir is withdrawn, appropriate groundwater curtailment rules can be adopted for the various parts of the basin that will achieve reasonably stable and sustainable groundwater levels without devastating Harney County's economy. OWRD mischaracterized and subsequently delineated the Harney Basin as a single groundwater reservoir at its discretion, rather than differentiate the distinct units or subareas. It did this rather than recognize these different groundwater reservoirs and account for their variable groundwater conditions in the rules, despite repeated local requests and feedback. OWRD's unilateral policy decision claiming the Harney Basin is a single groundwater reservoir enables OWRD to subject the entire Harney Basin to a purely regulatory approach, even if significant portions of the basin are reasonably stable, not overdrawn, and do not have data showing that they meet the criteria for a critical groundwater area. This approach to the rulemaking does great harm to the people of Harney County, the agriculture and beneficial use of the groundwater, and the socioeconomic health and survivability of Oregon's largest landmass county. The term groundwater reservoir is ultimately a policy term that was defined at the discretion of OWRD, and this discretionary and optional designation will harm Harney County and is not needed to achieve success. To opt for the subjective and unwarranted designation against strong local objection implies a lack of collaboration and integrity, suggests an ulterior motive, and should be corrected immediately.
Commissioner Doro, you're starting to break up a little bit. You may want to turn your video off if there's a bandwidth issue.
Yes, let me try that.
She's coming through just fine online. For what it's worth, the issue may be on your end.
Thank you.
Would you like me to turn the video off? Just in case?
Keep trying.
All right. All right, I'll just keep trying.
May I just let you know your comments are at 5 minutes. So
How long do I have?
Well, we did the math and we were hoping that people could stay plus or minus 5 minutes, but
all right. I'll jump
your 4 points. But
let me go quickly and cut the meat and just get to the basics, and I will send in this written as well, so you have it all.
Thank you. I apologize for not putting that expectation out in the beginning of the hearing.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Nope, my bad.
All right. ORS 537.735 clearly allows OWRD to define the boundaries of the critical groundwater area by indicating which of the groundwater reservoirs located either in whole or in part within the area in question are included within the critical groundwater area. If OWRD persists in its definition, despite continued local objection, then they should use their authority to designate part of the groundwater reservoir, not the whole. Addressing areas of decline, 2 things. I'll just say that I won't go into the discussion. 1, conditions across the Harney Basin are relatively stable, and areas of reasonably stable groundwater levels should be excluded from a critical groundwater area designation. And 2, Only areas that meet the definition of a critical groundwater area should be designated as such and regulated. Fiscal and economic impacts. We appreciate that OWRD listened to requests from the RAC to produce a comprehensive economic impact analysis of the proposed rules. And this report showed significant adverse impacts to Harney County's economy with this rulemaking. It basically results in a 17% reduction in economic output. That is huge. When a professional economic impact analysis and local input is summarily ignored or discounted, despite OWRD and the Commission's responsibilities to reduce economic impact, and when in fact there are alternatives to the rulemaking, that is beyond disappointing, and it's bad government in action, and one might argue against the law. In summary, there were a lot of areas, comments that I have, and I hope you'll read my written comments on the lack of collaboration and meaningful public engagement during the process. I won't take your time here, but it's very important, so please read it, commissioners. But in summary and moving forward, the only parts of the Harney Basin with substantial evidence to meet the criteria for the designation of a critical groundwater area are Weaver Springs, Dog Mountain, and Northeast Crane subareas. The rest of the Harney Basin is only included in the critical groundwater area because of their purported hydrologic connection to the areas of decline, and OWRD's oversimplified definition of the groundwater reservoir and hydrologic connectivity. A much more sensible approach would be to only designate a critical groundwater area in the areas where substantial evidence supports the conclusion that the criteria are met, while excluding those areas which are not meaningfully contributing to or being affected by groundwater declines, nor are overdrawn. OWRD had taken an approach to decide, announce, defend, and repeatedly demonstrate toward the end of the process that it was not open to feedback from the RAC or Harney County public. As a result, the people of Harney County will suffer greatly. Let's change this starting today with cooperative, transparent, collaborative work going forward. If the anticipated time frame for adoption of 512 rules needs to be delayed, postponed, extended, and the work continue in order to incorporate important public comment and get this rulemaking right, I urge that to happen. Thank you very much. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you, Commissioner Doro, and thank you for your public service. That is that's an important piece of work that you're doing as a commissioner.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Christopher Hall, representing Water League.
Good morning, Commissioner Mole and everyone in the room. Can you hear me okay? My name is Christopher Hall, and I'm with Water League from Cave Junction in the Illinois Valley, located in Josephine County.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to share some initial thoughts on the Division 12 rulemaking process. Water League will be submitting extensive written comments on the rules in the coming days. I beg your indulgence as I am recovering from a head cold, and so you might pick up on that. First, Water League wishes to express its sincere gratitude to OWRD staff. We appreciate the time and effort invested in this extensive and complex rulemaking process. We are particularly grateful for the staff's patience, active listening, and considerate responsiveness throughout the many meetings, discussions, and follow-up communications. The thoroughness of the documentation and the careful administration of meetings were noted and are a testament to your commitment to this process. I don't think I could overstate our appreciation on this matter. The Oregon Water Resources Department's Chapter 690 Division 512 rules mark a long overdue shift in groundwater management, outlining how officials shall discharge their fiduciary duty to protect groundwater for present and future generations and ecosystems. The rule aligns with Oregon's constitutional and statutory obligations to manage water as a public trust. In the Harney Basin, unsustainable overpumping depletes groundwater reserves, some of which are not being renewed at human timescales. Overpumping also impairs domestic wells, springs, and groundwater-dependent ecosystems. These harms threaten the public health, safety, and welfare, and flora and fauna in the present and will impair them in the future. The Division 512 rules propose a 35% reduction in water use over 30 years to curb groundwater mining. In so doing, the state recognizes that continued over-extraction is contrary to the public interest. By designating the Harney Basin as a critical groundwater area, the rules establish a legal framework for equitable and sustainable groundwater management, rebalancing intergenerational equity and ecological integrity with short-term extractive interests. Water League assiduously avoids recommending to OWRD hydrologists how to run their models, conduct their studies and research, and determine solutions to complex scientific and engineering problems related to resolving the problem of excessively declining groundwater levels. Throughout the RAC process, some RAC members and members of the public stated that they did not understand much of the complex details presented, which resulted in tripling the number of RAC meetings, adding more than a year to the process, and prompting a dozen informal discussion groups run by Oregon Consensus and the High Desert Partnership. These accommodations were to explain the scientific research, groundwater models, and complexities of the Division 512 rulemaking policies so that RAC members and the public could provide input and advice to help OWRD consider various perspectives. We strongly recommend anyone who wants to understand the geology and hydrology of the Harney Basin to read the USGS and Oregon Water Resources Department study titled Groundwater Resources of the Harney Basin, Southeastern Oregon. This study was shared with the public as part of the Division 512 rulemaking process. Many people have an interest in the well-being of the public's water sources, whether they live in any particular basin today, lived there in the past, or may live there in the future, whether they visit the region, have friends and family that have ties to the region, or care about the water sources for ecological, spiritual, ancestral, social, cultural, and economic interests during the present and long-term future. We contend that people who have not been born yet hold the same type of interests, and our actions today should not foreclose upon their forthcoming rights to enjoy the same. Water use and water quality are broadly held concerns by the public across and through all basins. The law declares that, quote, all water within the state from all sources of water supply belongs to the public, end quote. No one person can own the water because it belongs to everyone. We note how the notice of proposed rulemaking, similar to the tone of a dozen plus RAC meetings, frames regulatory actions with a dour tone. The language is devoid of optimism, reflecting the water management proposals from a present-day water user outlook. This bias contrasts sharply with how the same actions might be viewed from a future perspective. Those living in the future when water sources have been stabilized would likely be delighted, seeing these rules not as a cause for harm, but as a forward-thinking decision that prevented the collapse of the basin's resources and ensured their availability for generations to come. While Water League prefers a more robust outcome, we strongly support the designation of a critical groundwater area and OWRD's implementation proposal. The department has a fiduciary duty to uphold the public trust, prioritize future generations, and restore hydrologic balance to the basin. Thank you for this opportunity to provide these comments. We are very grateful.
Thanks, Chris. Apparently nobody. Okay. Okay, so we'll move to the.
Oh, there's a new chat.
All good?
All good. Yep.
So we'll move to the commenters in the room who signed up. We'll just go by order here. Again, it's not hard and fast, but about 5 minutes would give us all a chance to hear the 10 additional commenters in the spaces in between and still respect the 10 to noon timeframe. I just want to say I appreciate so many people coming out in what I know is a particularly busy time for the agricultural community especially. So thanks for your time this morning. I assume people are aware that we'll also have another hearing this evening between 5 and 7 in the same space. And so if you want to come again or encourage some of your partners, friends, and neighbors to come, please do that. So first we'll hear from Rob Frank, who it says Harney County. Rob, are you representing Harney County with these comments? And then on deck is Lori O'Connor, also a citizen of Harney. So Rob.
My name is Rob Frank. I'm a Harney County Commissioner. Thanks for the opportunity to comment today. The county will be submitting extensive written comments to the department, but I wanted to give just a brief overview of some of our main talking points in this forum to the citizens. And so there's sufficient information to close the Harney Basin new appropriations, limit groundwater pumpage to historic beneficial use, and curtail groundwater in areas that have met the criteria for a critical groundwater area designation. However, 2 of the 3 regions in the USGS study were not in a deficit, and for that reason, we feel that the lower Blitzen, upper Blitzen, Silver Creek portions of the Sylvie sub-area should be excluded from the critical groundwater area. We think that they should proceed with regulatory action in Weaver Springs sub-area, given that it clearly meets the criteria for critical groundwater. The remaining areas, Northeast Crane and Dog Mountain, we should set thresholds at which regulatory action will occur and encourage voluntary agreements until thresholds are met or exceeded. And we should pursue voluntary joint action with groundwater users as required by law and minimize economic impacts to the greatest extent possible. OWRD should review existing policies to ensure equitable application across the state. They should also consult cities to determine the appropriate amount of water allocated for each 6-year period check-in and exempt recreational and commercial geothermal use. Something that I think is worth noting is never in the RAC 512 process was an advisory committee structure established. And never in that process did the advisory committee make a formal recommendation. Rather, the department would present and defend its stance, and at the next meeting, they present how that RAC input was incorporated. And more often than not, I feel like a lot of RAC members were scratching their heads trying to figure out how that had been construed from what was said at the last meeting. I found that especially troubling when I viewed the Groundwater Advisory Committee meeting virtually last week and witnessed a 3-hour open discussion that resulted in a recommendation which will be given to the Water Resource Commission, an opportunity that I feel wasn't afforded to the RAC or to the local governments. So with that said, thank you again for the opportunity to comment. I'll say it again tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Frank, and thank you for your service on your commission. Next, we have Lori O'Connor, a citizen of Harney, followed by Lisa Brown of Water Watch.
So if you guys can step closer to the microphone, people online are having a hard time hearing you. Yes.
There's no electricity in that
No,
chair.
you don't even have to sit down. You can just stand up, but if you want to come closer to the room when you make the public hearing,
Okay.
comments would be great.
Good morning. I'm Lori O'Connor. I've been a resident. My husband and I and our 4 sons moved here from southwestern Montana, attracted to this. It had a very logical approach toward agriculture. It seemed like that had gone on pretty much within reason and with sustainability for over 100 years. And just about that time, the irrigation became more and more evident. Most of the old time locals would stand around, scratch their heads and go, I don't know how long this can go on. I don't know that a desert can provide this level of water agriculture. But like most citizens in a rural area, the majority is often silent. The majority tolerates what their neighbors are doing. They don't want interference on the part of the state or any regulation. And yet over the decades, it became apparent that it could not be sustained. any fool could see we were over extracting water in this basin. An 8th grader could have told their science class, the recharge is nowhere near what the discharge is in this area. How long does that last? So when the critical study was formed, I entered into a few of the initial meetings. There were not subgroups at that time. And I thought, where is the average citizen going to be heard? There's no representation for stock wells. There's no representation for residential wells. Are the cities concerned? Where are these people? It was all about the agricultural footprint, which is an important issue in Harney County, but it is not the only issue. It is unfortunately usually the issue that most of our governance locally hears. It is also, I think, bearing undue pressure on a process such as this. Because if you lose 1,100 residentials and stock wells in this community, that is also a huge economic issue on top of quality of life and just morality. So many people have invested their life savings into living in this rural area. They are not impacting the groundwater levels, but they need to have access to water in order to sustain a small herd or, you know, maybe some other growth in agriculture or just living there. I don't think they should be denied that when, you know, when they started their process. It was obvious it could go on. I think we have erred in this community, and this happens really in all stressed rural communities. We have erred in favor of economic development and over allocation for over 30 years now. I think to proceed with egregious caution at this point is an insult to those of us who have been seeking relief for at least the last 10 years. And now we're looking at another 30 years before there's a guarantee of some kind of stable aquifer. That to me is just crazy. But that's where the rulemaking has gotten us. I'm not going to try to turn over this cart and call for a whole new review. I understand, and Mr. Frank, you're saying that there was never an advisory committee formed for the community opinion. I think 6 years of the water meetings in this community gave ample time for this community to work things out. And we were not overlorded by OWRD. I didn't feel that at all. So I think there was a process for community input. It was valid. It was aggressively and just, it was a huge burden for everyone that took part with it, really. It was a great commitment. So we went through that, and I am so impressed with where you have arrived today. Even I can understand your timeline. I had no idea what you were going to arrive at. After the community input process of 6 years, I couldn't figure out how OWRD was going to come up with any kind of a plan that would be scientific, reasonable, and compassionate within the boundaries of the resource issue. I think that if we extend this the way the timeline is now, I would like to counter, it is too generous. It is too lax. I think that not addressing transfers with a more critical review is a serious issue, and the Domestic Well Group has challenged that from 2016 and 17. I think to not be addressing deepening of wells causes serious harm to many neighbors around those wells. And I think that it's going to impact more and more residential and stock wells. I think the delays, I understand that, 3-year delay to implementation and then a graduated process of executing reasonable allocation levels. I understand that, but I think it's way too slow. I'm very concerned that myself and many of my neighbors will lose their wells within the next 5 to 10 years. And our lifestyle cannot be sustained by a cistern. We have livestock, we can't do that. So I think that the other flaw in what I've seen in the paperwork, there has not been enough attention addressed to how injured parties are going to be aided. And I'm not talking about CREP. I'm not talking about buying out agricultural water. I'm talking about, what about the people who already are having to haul their own water? What about the people who have suffered quality of water issues? Nothing is being done, really. The domestic well fund that was established due to the pressures from the domestic municipal group got so watered down. It's a fraction of what we need. I understand they feel it can service something like 20 more wells or whatever. That isn't the issue. It only partially pays for the damage. So I think the domestic and Stockwell people continue to be ignored in this plan. I think that the future generation is being marginalized in this plan. I wish it was more aggressive. I understand the people that have to make a living or have been making a living at the expense of our shared water resource must have a way to resume or redefine their lifestyle. So thank you for everything you've done. I'm just really impressed with the outline. I can understand it. I can now go to my neighbors and explain it to them. I do want to address one thing. I've heard 2 rumors in the community, and everybody assures me they're not any part of this current plan. A lot of people assumed when they read that all wells, all permitted wells must have meters. A lot of people in this community think that means they're residential wells and they're stock wells. And that idea has actually been promoted through various meetings and things in this community, ad hoc things. So that's shameful because it's not a fact and it's not in this plan. The other thing is a lot of the small operators fear that they're going to have to start paying for their water by volume in the immediate future. I don't see that in this plan. Personally, logically, I think throughout the world, we're all going to see that we have to pay for the volume of water we each use, especially if it's for commercial enterprise. So I just want that to get cleared so that some people aren't being scared into submission. Thank you for everything you've done. I wish more of the public would speak up and would be here, because I think 30% of the people are being the loudest in this process. Thank you very much.
Can I ask just one very quick clarifying
Sure.
question? You referred to the 6-year period group. Were you talking about the place-based water plant?
Yes,
part?
yes,
Thank you.
yes,
Just wanted to
yes.
make
Yes.
sure I understood that correctly. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Lisa Brown, representing Water Watch of Oregon, followed by Melody Moltz, who is listed as a farmer. Lisa?
All right, for the record, Lisa Brown with Water Watch of Oregon. I was a RAC member and have been working on groundwater issues in the Harney Basin since 2014. I want to first thank the department for running an in-depth, exhaustive RAC process, for all the analysis, and for taking the time to discuss the model and take feedback and do iterative runs on the model. I think that was very helpful. I won't repeat all the process details because I think Chris Hall covered a lot of them. I would add that as somebody that's participated in a lot of RACs, this RAC was the most data-rich, information-rich, and well-documented process. And you can see that on the 512 RAC webpage.
Can you speak up louder so we can hear you back here? You can't hear.
I can try. You might have to move up. Fred Otley always asks me to do that as well.
We could actually move the seat around this direction if we wanted to still go into the aisle, wouldn't it?
Probably.
You want to move your seat just to the side so your voice is projecting a little
really.
more into the room?
Don't really want to do that, no.
She needs a megaphone.
I will be submitting extensive written comments, but I do want to touch on a few points. First, because of the groundwater declines that have already happened in the basin, there have been significant impacts to groundwater discharge to lowland streams, springs, and native vegetation. And of course, native vegetation supports wildlife, but also supports domestic animals. And, according to the USGS, between 1980 and 2018, they modeled a 44% decrease in discharge to lowland springs and streams, with a similar decrease in natural ET, which is a signal of native vegetation. And so when we consider timelines to stabilizing the groundwater, levels, I just think it's critical to consider the trajectory that we're already on and the impacts that have already occurred. And I also want to touch on domestic wells. I think the current proposed rules would ultimately result in 98 domestic wells being dried up, with I think a quarter of those sort of still to come under the pumping that would be allowed prior to stabilizing the groundwater levels. And, you know, I don't think that's appropriate under the water code, but I think it's just made all the much worse because the state doesn't have really viable programs in place right now to address that or help folks whose wells are going dry. And I'll detail that more in my written comments, but I think, you know, the important point is just these rules will result in people losing their drinking water, and we don't really have a system in place to help them effectively. You know, the rules can contain an adaptive management program, which I think is a great addition. I am concerned that, you know, it does not include an evaluation of how the rules affect streams, springs, domestic wells, and native vegetation. It only looks at groundwater levels. And so, you know, we could be having unexpected impacts on those conditions and the domestic wells. And it would not be addressed in the adaptive management program. I think that potentially sets the basin up for major problems, and it's worth looking at whether the adaptive management program could be broadened to include consideration of those impacts. I think that to address these and other issues, the department should consider tightening the timelines to stabilization. So 30 years is getting pretty far out there into the future. And I guess I would just close by saying that while implementing the pumping limits won't be easy, and, you know, obviously create a lot of challenges for the basin, I think it is just critical for the long-term sustainability of the basin to take these actions and put the basin on a more positive path into the future. And I'll close it there, and thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, we have Melody Molt, farmer, followed by Ty Richardson with the City of Burns. Melody?
Hello, I'm Melody Molt. We have pivots pumping water. And when we purchased this land, we paid a lot of money for the water rights, our historic over 100-year-old water rights we have. I don't know that that's being addressed strong enough because my right to pump water supersedes somebody else's. And I understand the people who have recently purchased ground, put some money into it, drilled wells, want to pump, want to make hay, whatever they're farming in this area. But somewhere along the way, my right should supersede theirs, and to treat everybody the same is against everything that's happened in water rights over hundreds of years.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Melody. Next up, we have Ty Richardson from the City of Burns, followed by Mario Petrilli. Hi.
Hello, my name is Ty Richardson. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Burns and a resident of Burns. I'm the direct responsible contact for the city's water distribution system and supply. The city's water system provides safe drinking water and adequate fire protection for the city. Our system consists of 5 wells and a 2 million gallon storage reservoir. I'm here today to oppose the rulemaking for Division 512 rules and ask for exemption for municipalities. And here are the reasons. Disproportionate burden, and municipal water users. The proposed Division 512 rules call for an 82% reduction in Burns authorized groundwater withdrawals, while agricultural users, the largest water user, face only 17% on average out. Municipal use accounts for just 0.68% of all water rights and 2% of groundwater rights in the Harney Basin, even though most county residents depend on municipal supply. No net gain for basin stability. Scientific studies and USGS models show that Burns is not an area of critical groundwater decline. Most severe declines are linked to high volume junior agriculture uses, not municipal systems like ours. Cutting municipal supply won't solve the basin's overdraft problem, but it would seriously restrict our city's ability to serve residents and plan for future growth. Regulatory complexity and unfairness. Burns already complies with rigorous multi-agency infrastructure planning requirements. The additional cap and reporting requirements add unnecessary administrative burden without improving water stewardship. The city's water rights are senior to a large share of others in the basin, both by date and by volume, yet we are being asked to sacrifice the most. Municipal water is for community well-being. Municipal water rights are protected under Oregon law to ensure they serve present and future community needs, not for speculative, for-profit, or short-term use. These rights should not be compromised by rules that primarily target other, more problematic users. Request for proportionate curtailment and exemption. We urge OWRD to exempt municipal rights from these rules and target direct curtailments at the sectors and locations responsible for basin-wide declines, particularly high-volume, for-profit, junior irrigation users. Burns is fully committed to conservation and collaboration, but needs policy that is fair, effective, and recognizes the essential limited role of municipal users. Commitment to partnership. Burns stands ready to work with OWRD on workable solutions that safeguard both the basin's future and our community needs. We request a regulatory framework that aligns with Oregon law and state planning goals, supporting both water conservation and sustainable community-driven growth. Thank you.
I can ask you one question. The 5 wells, is that the sole source, or is there any surface wells? It's all those wells. Thank you very much. You might need to stretch. Step up. For some reason, there's a block here, so we'll take a 10-second stretch. Mario Petrilli. And Mario will be followed by Stacy Davies from the Roaring Springs Ranch.
Good morning, everyone. As a point of clarification, Rule 512 proposes an immediate drop in acre feet from 3.0 to 2.5. That's a 16.66% decrease. Rule 512 also wants to initiate what I would call reductions for beneficial use. For a pivot farmer that's doing 160 acres square, and that's his right, reducing it to beneficial use for the pivot would reduce his acreage allotment by 21.66%. There are permits here that already have beneficial use requirement. So when I take a look at all the granted water rights, the average is more like 15.55% across the entire SWMPA. The initial hit in 2028 will be approximately about 31%. Then the PTW will go into action. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
To the paralegal reading this letter in the future, as now proposed, Rule 512 has 2 fundamental flaws. Estimated groundwater discharge rates are too high and recharge rates are historically too low. We will know where we want to go and we will have a way to get there, but we don't know for sure when to stop or what will happen to the people and economies here when we do. This may prove fatal to the rule in its present form. The second fundamental flaw, the rule proposes to measure aquifer recharge rates using long-term and test wells not well placed in all sub-areas. The better way is to measure recharge using actual static levels, other than the water master making irregular inspections on private wells. Good luck with that. Piezometers. They are relatively inexpensive, work great, and being passive, having no moving parts, last a long time. I used one on my well in Washington 20 years ago. Just seal one end of the tape, roll it into the borehole, you're done. I did not purchase the display module. I used an ohm meter instead. That well was not regulated. My understanding is many corporate growers use this simple technology to monitor their wells. If the division's noble attempt is to monitor all wells, then recording monthly flows and static levels make more sense than measuring total discharges alone while guessing at recharge rates. I'm a communication systems engineer. So this was simple for me to identify the fundamental problem of knowing function outputs without knowing domain inputs. Calculations using these derivatives can be made, but if I am missing crucial input data and make a wrong guess, error margins can be excessive and costly. Simple calculus. Mandating continuous well discharge and static level records by using flow meters and piezometers solves this problem. Dear paralegal, if the division does not incorporate an in situ full kit measurement solution to determine groundwater discharge and recharge rates, especially when subsurface flows and percolation rates are not consistent in and among the proposed 7 sub-areas, then consider this another arrow in your legal quiver. Thank you for your time and consideration.
We have Stacy Davies from the Roaring Spring Ranch Incorporated, followed by Craig Mayer with Ed Staub and Sons Petroleum on deck.
My name is Stacy Davies, General Manager of Roaring Springs Ranches, representing the ranches. We will be submitting detailed written comments by the deadline of the 13th, so I'll spare the detail today. We do appreciate the ongoing community process, both with the 512 rulemaking and the collaborative process, and really support the decisions they've made and the effort they've made. We have just a few points we want to add to the record. We dispute some of the boundaries of the subbasins. We realize that they're delineated based on groundwater gradient, groundwater level trends, hydrostrategic materials, but there are some areas that just don't make sense. And so our comments will be detailed with maps on those areas. Secondly, regulation should occur by priority date, as already statutory outlined. Priority dates of water rights should dictate how water use is controlled. The increased, confusing, and likely to be contested rules will only cause delays in implementing the program. Priority date is considered in the schedule for reductions on a sub-area basis. But with the dispute of the boundaries of the sub-basin areas, we question whether priority date should be administered across the entire CGA. The proposed rulemaking brings to light 670 groundwater rights in the area that will be affected by the proposed rule. This means that 670 contested cases may be added to the already extreme backlog of contested cases on the Water Resource Department's docket. We feel those should not be considered as they're being considered at this point. And that's a summary of our comments. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Stacy. May I ask one question? I'm just
Yeah.
not familiar enough with the geography here. Can you tell me where the Roaring Springs Ranch sits and which sub-basin that's in?
Majority of the ranch is out of the sub-basin, but we have property that would be in the upper Blitzen and the lower Blitzen voltage area.
Thank you. Very much. Okay, next is Craig Nair. Nair, am I saying your?
Yeah, near
Near.
and far, like Sesame Street.
Perfect. Craig Neer and Jody Richards is on deck. Craig is with Ed Staub and Sons Petroleum, and Jody Richards represents the Burns Paiute Tribal Council.
Thank you. My name is Craig Neer and I am here with Ed Staub and Sons Petroleum. And you may first ask why a petroleum company is so invested in groundwater rights. And it would mostly be due to the impact to the community and specifically our business and other businesses. So 90% of our revenue is derived from people in agriculture. So when we look at taking 30% cuts, Ed Staub and Sons employs 24 full-time living wage careers. And so we'd be looking at reducing those by 7 or 8 employees. And the trickle-down effect that will fall into the community is greater than I think anyone is acknowledging. So we look at schools, hospitals, other businesses, restaurants. The trickle-down effect will be astronomical. And I don't think that a full impact plan has really been put forth. Some specifics that I find problems as I have been engaged in this process is that there's a real lack of holistic management approach. So most of the proposed rules are narrowly focused on regulating private groundwater use without accounting for major contributions to the aquifer recharge, mainly federal and state public lands. So we look at nearly 75% of the land in Harney County being publicly owned, and these lands specifically influence the hydrology and recharge of the aquifer. Yet no mechanisms are in place within the rulemaking to manage any of the water on any of these lands. As we talk more about the farmers and ranchers being asked to shoulder the full burden of the water conservation, and other stakeholders are not taking place in the conversations. There's also no mention of investment in recharge and enhancement projects, such as manage aquifer recharge, improve forest and rangeland management, or the restoration of wetland ecosystems on public lands, all which would affect the recharge rate. We're very focused on discharge rates, and we're doing little to address recharge rates. These strategies could supplement water levels without cutting off vital access to water to local producers. Local input appears to have a limited influence in shaping a lot of these rules, even though agriculture producers are the most affected. As a business manager, I can say these rules threaten the viability of longstanding responsible agricultural operations that have already made efforts to conserve water voluntarily. Many of the people that are on the commission are unelected officials, and many of the community members feel jaded as they don't feel like they're being represented with elected officials. Many of the people who have voiced concerns over the water use are people who do not live here, do not make a living here. And so I feel as if you do not live here, you're going to have a hard time understanding the unique intricacies of our community. Before any rules are implemented, I think that federal and public land agencies should be included in the groundwater recharge planning and accountability. Without that, we're not going to have a feasible economic livelihood. And that's all I have for today.
Great, thanks, Craig.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Okay, Jody Richards with the Burns Paiute Tribal Council, followed by Susan Ramson, who's an irrigator. Jody?
Isha'wala, good morning. My name is Jody Richards, Tribal Council Member of the Burns Paiute Tribe. I appear before you today on behalf of the Tribal Council and the Wadadaka people of the Burns Paiute Tribe. We appreciate the opportunity to provide public comment on the proposed Division 512 rulemaking and the designation of a critical groundwater area in the Harney Basin. Standing in sovereignty, the Burns Paiute Tribe holds federally reserved water rights under the Winters Doctrine. These rights were not granted by the state of Oregon. They were reserved by the United States for our benefit and our survival when our reservation was established. These rights are superior to state-issued water rights and cannot be altered, reduced, or extinguished by state regulation. But even deeper than that, our people hold Aboriginal water rights. These are rights rooted in original occupation in the springs, rivers, and aquifers our ancestors have depended on since time immemorial. These rights are not granted by the government. They are retained, protected, and still living. Courts have upheld these rights in the United States versus Winans, 1905. The U.S. Supreme Court confirmed that tribes retain off-reservation rights of access and use, even if those rights are not explicitly stated in treaties. In United States versus Adair, 1983, the Ninth Circuit reaffirmed that tribal water rights for traditional uses like fishing and gathering survive modern legal regimes and remain valid against state interference. That is a legal ground on which we stand on. 2, violations of consultation and process. The tribe has not been properly consulted. Procedural outreach to former staff and participation in Rules Advisory Committee does not meet the standards of government-to-government consultation. Oregon Administrative Rule 690-010-0150, Executive Order 96-30, and principles of federal Indian law require formal engagement with tribal government, not peripheral staff dialogue. The tribe formally requested consultation by July 31st. That deadline passed without an adequate response. The state's attempt to schedule consultation after the public comment period is a violation of both the letter and spirit of the law. 3, cultural and economic harm. Groundwater is not just a technical issue for the Burns Paiute Tribe. It is a matter of cultural survival and economic feature. Our lands, long underdeveloped due to late federal recognition and finally beginning to see opportunity, yet this proposed rule threatens to lock us into disadvantage, restricting the very water we need to house our people, build our economy, and feed our future. This is a systematic inequity. The state has prioritized non-tribal water users for over a century. Now that scarcity looms, tribes are asked to bear an equal burden, or worse, a disproportionate one, for a crisis we did not create. We are stewards of this land, but stewardship without sovereignty is just lip service. 4, a path forward, co-stewardship, not control. The state of Oregon cannot regulate or impair tribal water rights. The state can, however, partner with us. We invite co-stewardship grounded in mutual respect, equitable data sharing, and tribal-led carve-outs that respect our self-regulation and jurisdiction. We urge OWRD to adopt an approach that honors its trust responsibility and avoids further litigation. That includes halting implementation of rules that would apply to tribal lands, recognizing the Burns Paiute Tribe's pre-existing rights in any rule framework, supporting a future adjudication process that acknowledges our claims. If OWRD proceeds with this rulemaking, the tribe specifically requests that a provision be added clarifying that the rules do not apply to any existing or unadjudicated water rights of the Burns Paiute Tribe. We also ask that the state connect with the Umatilla Water Commission to study regional co-management frameworks that center tribal sovereignty. In closing, this proposed rule does not just regulate groundwater. It threatens to erase rights, impair features, and set precedent that undermines the sovereignty of every tribe in Oregon. The state cannot claim to honor equity while it ignores original rights. These waters have carried our stories for generations, and no rule, no metric, no reduction formula can override that truth. To act without consent is to repeat the mistakes of history. To act together is to build a future. We ask you to choose the latter. Thank you for your time. We are prepared to work with you, but we will also stand firm. Respectfully, the Burns Paiute Tribal Council.
Thank you, Jody. Finally, we have Susan Ramsey. Sorry,
That's the Scottish side of the family. The Elis are the English.
Ramsey.
I don't get along too well.
And you're represented as an irrigator.
I am representing as an irrigator
Thank you, Susan.
and a citizen of Harney County. I had some organized notes when I came, and I've been writing the whole time everybody's been speaking, so this is gonna be a little disjointed, but your patience, please. First of all, I live in Princeton. I have 4 pivots, 3 wheel lines. And I use the water rights. I'm outside of your boundary at this moment, but I don't trust you to try to suck us in the Virginia Valley. I'm disappointed that NRAC was referenced as giving approval to this plan. If that was a misstatement, I was basically fed that information initially, and I appreciate Rob's clarifying that this was taken out of context. I truly believe that the violators of the users of their water rights should individually be punished by water right reductions if they're the ones that are basically the key contributors to our water loss. It is not everybody in this county, it is not every water right. But we have a handful of people who have basically tapped into our aquifer and have used it possibly. I won't accuse them of it, but I'd like to have some documentation of how much water they have used, if it is over or below what we were allocated. I know I'm way below because I'm very efficient with our watering. But I do not want the state saying that my 3 acre feet are going to be reduced to 2.5. You let me make that decision based on what I'm growing. Both Harney Electric and OTEC send us a bill every month for our water usage. I only have 1 well that supplies my pivots and my wheel lines. I have a good well, and it's small. It's only 12 inches, but I have great water access. I file my water usage report at the end of the year with the state as to how much I've used, and I've been under my usage allocated. But OTEC and Harney Electric can also take that same kilowatt usage and apply a formula, which is what I do for my water use, my report, to calculate the acre feet that we've been using, or I've been using. I think everybody's meter could be converted using that formula, and you too would find out just what your water usage is. Are you pushing the limit? Do you need to be aware of it? Or you have plenty left, save it for a rainy day? Or if you're a born violator, then I think you should go on the list. One of the things that was never brought to our attention at any of these meetings, and I haven't attended a lot, I've been a business owner and a ranch owner. I recently lost my husband, so my life has kind of been upside down. But there is a program, and I'm not sure if I saw it under the Oregon Department of Ag, Biz Oregon, or the Oregon Water Resource Department, but there are programs for aquifer recharging stations that take water out of live streams, or whatever, I'll just say live streams, rivers. It puts it through a cleansing program, a sanitation program, and then it infuses it into the aquifer. Prineville is using one right now because Google needs more water than they can pump. And so they're basically recharging it. I'm not sure exactly how they're doing it, but I do know there's a program. I do know the state has grants for these programs, and we've never been introduced to them. The Department of Ag, I just printed off a list, unless I lost it already. No, right here, where there are upcoming meetings that they're holding that have several resolutions, number 107, 295, and 301, that have to do with priority for agriculture use of water, protection of Oregon agriculture, and minimizing conflicts of coexistence in agriculture. There's several others, but they're not directly related to water, other than suitable housing quantities, which this whole program is going to have an impact on. I do not believe that any water right should be waived as a broad
brush on everybody. I don't think they need to basically beat us all up to get a few people to conform or get back in line. Our municipalities are going to be heavily and negatively impacted by the same broad brush approach that they are suggesting. I was given an example, and I'm hanging my hat on this example. If Hines and Burns are allocated 1,000 acre-feet, this is just an example, it's not precise. And in the last 4 years or 5 years, they only used 220 acre-feet. The rest is going to be removed. They will up it, they will up it by 10%. They'll give it from 200 to 220, but the rest of it is not guaranteed to be there for them to use for future expansion or whatever happens in this county that is within the municipality's oversight. I think because of some major errors in Oregon Water Resources Department data, that this whole proposal is flawed and must not be used as a determining factor in this insanity that you're calling rulemaking. Annual water use reports are due by the end of every year. I'm usually a little bit late, but it gets filed. And one thing that a lot of individuals are not thinking about, and I brought up at another meeting, that this program jeopardizes every individual's estate planning. If you thought you were going to give your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, your ranch, your farm, you may find out that if this goes through, you're not going to get it. And if you decide that you're just going to wait and see what happens, you could be very rudely awakened at the end. So think of it that way. Every one of you have an estate, no matter how big, how small. You do not need Water Resource Department telling you how you can basically use your water right if you're using it prudently now. That might be all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susan. Ms. Ramsey, and condolences on the loss of your husband. Okay, at this time, I'm going to read the names of everyone. Bear with me, this is process we need for the record. I'm going to read the names of everyone who has spoken by Zoom and in the room today, and then I'm going to ask for if there's anyone else who would like to comment. So today by Zoom, we heard from Patty Doro, we heard from Christopher Hall. Then within the room, we heard from Rob Frank, Lori O'Connor, Lisa Brown, Melody Molt, Ty Richardson, Mario Petrilli, Stacy Davies, Craig Neer, Jody Richards, and Susan Ramsey. I've called the names of everyone who wishes to comment orally. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment at this hearing that hasn't yet signed up? I was talking with somebody over breakfast this morning who was just trying to give us a similar grounding, and she said that 2 years ago she couldn't have done what she will do, I think, this afternoon, which was speak at a public hearing. This is awkward. This is hard. This brings us all back to when we were in middle school and had to give a report. But we are going to pause for, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. And for those of you that have attended and haven't spoken, but maybe you have some thoughts churning, and you would like a little bit of time to put those together and comment, we're going to take a little break. Open the floor again to see if anybody additionally would like to comment before we close that. So why don't we take a 5-minute break in the hearing. We'll reconvene at 11:29. And we'll ask that question. Okay. Could I get everybody's attention again, please? So it's August 5th, 2025, and the time is 11:32. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment at this hearing? Is that a yes?
Yeah, I will.
Would you write your name down here for me, please?
Yeah.
So for the record, my name is Kala Hagel, and I'm here as a local landowner.
Thanks, Kala.
Thank you.
Okay, Kala Hagel, representing as a local landowner.
Yeah, so thank you for holding this public hearing this morning. I'm here to provide public comment on the proposed Harney Basin groundwater policies. My family and I live in the Dog Mountain area of Harney County, where we own land and rely on groundwater for both our home and livestock. I was an active participant in the community-based water planning effort for many years. And I speak from a place of deep investment in both the land and the collaborative process that has brought our basin to this pivotal moment. First off, I'll just state, as much as I appreciate all of the work that OWRD does, the groundwater crisis in Harney County is primarily due to the overallocation of groundwater rights by OWRD, not just local mismanagement. Groundwater permits have been issued beyond sustainable limits without accurate data, leading to a significant imbalance where usage exceeds recharge. Current groundwater management policy neglects ecological needs, threatening springs, wetlands, groundwater dependent vegetation. Without action, natural discharges will decline, impacting both ecological integrity and cultural values in the region. The past policies have also led to social and economic hardships for residents relying on groundwater, resulting in dry wells, failed crops, and land devaluation as well. But the community-based water plan, developed through years of local effort, presents actionable strategies for addressing the crisis. And I would encourage considering some of the key components of that plan, including domestic well assistance, so funding programs for well repair and water hauling, voluntary water use reduction, incentives for altering crops and reducing irrigated acreage, irrigation efficiency, investment in water saving irrigation technologies and a potential water bank, groundwater right retirement, compensation for voluntary reductions in groundwater rights, local capacity building. I feel like this is a really key one to make all of these things come together, is hiring full-time staff to support implementation. One of the other things I think I hear a lot amongst differing members of different groups that are interested in water in the basin is trying to maintain that community trust. So OWRD, I would appreciate some clarification on how all the work that we do here today, the public comments, the written comments, how those will be reviewed and incorporated. You know, everyone took time out of their busy lives to be here today. They'll be here again, maybe this afternoon or in this evening. The groundwater management sub-area boundaries, I think, as you've heard a couple of times, need to be reassessed to align with scientifically derived boundaries. I think some of those differ in this policy from those that were in the USGS Harney County groundwater study. But I think it's important to ensure technical accuracy in that policy. Monitoring, enforcement, and adaptive management. Effective monitoring and enforcement are essential. I think there should be adequate support for metering and compliance to avoid unfair burdens to landowners. Additionally, the adaptive management framework requires consistent funding, more staff, and ongoing public engagement to succeed and maintain that trust. Lastly, I'll just say OWRD and the Water Resources Commission must acknowledge their role in the overallocation crisis and invest in local implementation efforts. This includes funding, monitoring, and building resilience to ensure that the community-driven strategies outlined in the community-based water plan are honored and supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Anyone else who hasn't commented this morning who would like to? Again, I want to thank you all for coming out on a busy time of year. Let your friends and neighbors know about this evening, 5 p.m. back here, same approach. I'll again be the hearing officer. Well, thank you. And the current comment period is open through August 13th, right? 5 PM.
Before you adjourn, check to see if there's anyone online who wants to do that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, before we adjourn, is there anyone online who has not yet commented but would now like to?
Does this testimony get entered into the record?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not seeing anyone online.
Okay. This hearing is adjourned.
Should I take that?